Perfect. So, let's get started. I am Sean Borman. I'm the managing host of Vikings Territory. With me is Nick Olson, also Vikings Territory. And if you don't follow this guy on Twitter, I'm not sure what you're waiting for. He's a fantastic follow. He's been retweeted by Paul Allen lately, and the Athletic, and just really kicking some butt on
My
Twitter.
tweet made
It's
it into the Star Tribune. It was like the stupidest
There
tweet
you
I've ever
go.
tweeted. I almost didn't tweet it because I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever made.
Which
But
one was
that was fun.
that?
That was the Jair Alexander tweet
Oh,
about
sure.
Vikings weren't that good. Set to Enya.
Oh, I thought that part was hilarious. The fact that it's
It
set
was
to
like the
Enya.
dumbest thing I've ever made, but I don't know. It was funny. So
All right. Well, we've got a great show for you guys tonight. We'll talk a little bit about the Packers game. It's kind of in the rearview mirror, but there's still some great points to talk about. And we'll work our way into the Patriots game, too, coming up this Sunday. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the guy with me, Nick Olson. Nick, you're obviously a great Vikings follow. You're a great football mind, as PA would say. And tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started following the Vikings, and kind of what inspires you with your great research and your great articles.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. You flatter me. Sean's a great follow as well at Sean Boarman, Boar, man. Good follow, follows the team, picks up all the interesting nuggets from the pressers, and has a keen eye for the stats as well. So, um,
Appreciate it.
I the Vikings, I kind of grew up with them. It's in the blood, runs in the veins, runs with the family. I distinctly remember Randy Moss's rookie year, '98. That's kind of when the team got their hooks in me, and I've been following along ever since. But as far as like doing the serious analysis, that probably started around, I don't know, 5 years ago. So, um, but it's probably been taking an increasing role as the years have gone on. Joined Vikings territory middle about a year ago, I guess. So, uh, yeah, it's been a fun to follow this team. I picked a good time to get into it because between Zimmer and everything else going on, they've just been fantastic. So it's been fun.
So tell us about what you do now. What do you do for a career? Where do you live?
Yeah, well, I am in my work clothes, so if you don't see any Vikings paraphernalia, that is why. I'm a corporate attorney by trade. I do mergers and acquisitions. We companies buy and sell each other. We help negotiate, draft the agreements, figure out how to get that done. So it's interesting, but probably not as interesting. I don't think my M&A Twitter handle would have as many followers as my Vikings one does. So, and what was your other question?
Well, I asked where you live now.
Oh, so I work in New York and I live in New Jersey outside the city a little bit. So,
Are there many Vikings fans out that way?
oh yeah, we've got not just one, but we've got two like dedicated Vikings bars in just Manhattan alone. So that's pretty cool. If you ever come out, Jack Doyle's is a great spot, and Bar None is the other one, which is they're very good, but in different ways. Bar None is like a crazy, more of a divey atmosphere, and Jack Doyle's is like this upscale pub. But they're both awesome places. They do lots of fun events. So good town to be a Vikings fan in.
Oh, that's awesome. It's actually like on my list of like my places to go next. So I'll have to hit you up when I go there. But we'll
Definitely.
hop right into the Packers game recap. In fact, I saw you had a tweet about this as well. Aaron Rodgers. First of all, I just kind of want to talk about his performance altogether. He's getting up there in age. Obviously, still an amazing quarterback. He can do things that other quarterbacks just can't do. Uh, but his father time catching up with him, uh, and I saw he was obviously fooled by those AAA gaps. Is Zimmer catching up to him for that matter?
Zimmer has a winning record against Aaron Rodgers since he came to the Vikings. So I do think, and Rodgers has nothing but utmost respect for the things Zimmer does, and especially Harrison Smith. Rodgers has specifically called out Harrison Smith before in pressers, saying like, That's the one guy I'm looking at every snap to figure out what's he up to, what's he disguising, what's he going to do. There was a good play that Ben Fennell and Josh Cohen, who I think both work at the Athletic, or one of them maybe works for CBS or something, but they did a breakdown of one of the Rodgers sacks, and they point out that like there's a receiver that gets open, but because Rodgers is lasered in on what Harrison Smith is doing, he doesn't get to go into the next thing in the progression. And then the Vikings got a good pressure package going as well. So that also disrupted it, kept Rodgers from reading the field. But that's really, I think that's what's making, Rodgers the consistent MVP candidate have a bit of a down year this year. A lot of people have been giving McCarthy a lot of flack. And actually, I don't think McCarthy is like a Sean McVay type, but I think he's a pretty good offensive coach. He's got good play design, and he's obviously got a good track record with the quarterbacks. So I don't have an issue with the play calling so much. It's really just that Rodgers is such a improviser, and he loves to go off script, and he loves to roll out of the pocket and kind of do scramble drills with his wide receivers, where it's no longer like a designed um, set play route combination. You go here, and that'll pull the corner this way, and we'll take in the other way. It's more of just you just try and get open, and I'll fire it into the open window or the hole in the zone. So, and sometimes that works, but this year I think teams are wising up to it a little bit, and that refusal to take the easy check down is biting Rodgers in the butt. So I don't think it's necessarily that it's not like he's fallen off an age cliff. Like he still has all the arm strength, he still has all the talent. He can still, now that he's fully healthy again, he can still run. So he's still a great athlete, but it's just whereas before his improvising nature was to his benefit, now it's not helping him so much. And then on the schematic stuff, we we threw that triple A gap look at him I think twice in the game, and it was hilarious because you had Kendricks in one of the A gaps, Barr in the other A gaps, and Harrison Smith technically as like the zero technique, which is the nose tackle. Harrison Smith
Yeah.
nose tackle.
I
So
love it.
and I, I don't think that look works. It's like you've got basically three of your box linebackers playing right above the center, and it's going to screw with the protection call. But um, I don't know. It's something I think Zimmer can bust out as kind of like a cheeky little trick play almost, but for the defense. But really, I think a lot of the things that we did was trust our front four to get pressure, which they did a phenomenal job at. I think we only blitzed once or twice in the whole game, which Zimmer blitzes about league average, sometimes a little below league average, but he's really good when he does blitz. But this play against Rodgers, we just kind of kept contained, got pressure, and then the back seven were all phenomenal. So it was a good game. It's a good win.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And you talked about Rodgers and his ability to escape the pocket, which he really didn't do at all against the Vikings. I was going to get your thoughts on Jordy Nelson because Jordy Nelson and Rodgers had a rapport for a long time. Do you think the fact that he left is affecting Rodgers in any way?
I think that plays a big part of it. I think people underrate just how important chemistry is between a quarterback and a wide receiver. Like talking to the team we're going to go up against next week, a lot of the guys in the Patriots system have not been, other than Randy Moss, they have not been, and I guess Gronk, like elite athletes, elite caliber talents, but they are just exactly on the same page as Brady, and they know that if it's an option route and it's cover three, they can take the seam instead of the middle of the field. So it's just a very very important aspect of the passing game. And Rodgers, those Packers wide receivers and Devontae Adams is an extremely good wide receiver, borderline top 10 talent. And so it's not that Jordy was, especially in his later years, was it's not that they're missing his talent necessarily, but that especially when you go into like the backyard scramble drill, that matters a lot when you're working with an Aaron Rodgers type. So it's a good thing for you to point. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's an interesting point. I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah, it just seems with like the younger wide receivers that there's a little frustration between Rodgers and them not coming back to the ball like he likes, or there just seems to be a little disconnect there, and maybe that will develop more as he develops a rapport, like you said, with those
Yeah.
guys. Uh, and
The one other thing I'd point out is his mechanics seem to be a little off. I mean, Rodgers has always been famous for making these all-arm throws, back throws. Quarterback is really supposed to like the quarterback handbook will tell you, like throw off you don't want to throw off your back foot. You want to step into your throws, and you want ideally your front foot to be or your left foot to be pointing at the receiver where you want the ball to go. And Rodgers will do these things where he'll like scramble back and like hop while he throws, and that's something you normally see from like Blake Bortles. It's not something that usually works for quarterbacks. Rodgers does make it work, but this year, it's leading to some accuracy issues. It's leading to the ball not going to where it needs to be. So that's also creating issues in addition to the not playing within the play structure.
yeah, that's a good point as well. Even some throws to the flats I saw Rodgers miss, and
Yeah,
he never does that.
yeah, that went into the dirt. It's like, wow, you don't see this often. Which is,
Yeah.
I don't want to take away from Rodgers because when he's on, he is the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. And there's been a lot. There's been Marino and Young and Elway and everybody, but he's just on another level. So
And I know we talked about Rodgers not quite looking like himself. That kind of brings me to my next point about the return of Anthony Barr to the Vikings lineup last game and the impact he has on his defense. I know Zimmer said that he allows the Vikings defense to be a little more versatile in what they do. What do you think Barr's overall impact of this defense? I know I tweeted you once about that where I took some slack about one of my tweets comparing his sacks to Daniil Hunter's. I didn't realize Barr only had 10 and a half career sacks. I just figured it would be a lot higher. But anyway, what are your thoughts on his overall impact on the defense?
he's an interesting person to talk about because his impact, when you watch on TV screen, doesn't look like a lot, but then when you turn on the coach's tape, you just see he's just such a key cog in what makes Mike Zimmer's scheme work. Um, there's a reason that guys like Anthony Barr, you can only find him in the early first round because he's 6'5", 255 pounds, and he can cover, he can play the run, he can set the edge, and he can blitz off like he's Daniil Hunter. He's got basically the same athletic measurements as Daniil Hunter, but he's a stand-up linebacker. So that's a ridiculous amount of versatility. Like guys like Eric Wilson. Eric Wilson's he's been the backup and he's been good in spots, especially in coverage. He tends to have issues in run blocking just because of size. But Barr is 5 inches taller than Wilson and like 30 pounds heavier. So when you're going up against tight ends and blocking, or when you're trying to guard tight ends in coverage, that those 5 inches and 50 pounds or whatever make a huge difference. So um, he's just a very versatile back. He's also very, very smart. I don't think people appreciate Barr is when they do those creative third down blitzes. Barr is the one orchestrating that whole thing. He's the one wearing the green dot. You know how quarterbacks talk to the offensive coordinator, the head coach, in
Yeah,
those 15 seconds. Barr is the same way, but with on the defense, he wears the green dot. So he's the one talking to Zimmer, being like, "Okay, we're gonna show this, and then once the play clock hits 5, we're gonna drop back or whatever." So he sees things, and you don't. That's something you don't see in his Pro Football Focus grades or in his sack totals or in the other stats you might want to judge him by. Um, Coverage, he's a good linebacker. I don't think he's not Luke Kuechly. Um, his coverage stats this year, we all remember the Rams game where he gave up
mm,
3 touchdowns, although
trying to
two of
forget
them
it.
I wouldn't say were his fault at all. And then the Gurley one, you can kind of blame him, but at the same time, he wasn't doing anything he wasn't coached not to do. Gurley just that's a situation where Gurley ran a certain route that you would never expect him to do. And McVay was like, I'm going to run this route because nobody would ever expect him to do it. And Barr played the wrong route, but it's the right route. It's just McVay made it the wrong route. So um, even with those touchdowns included, Barr is top 5 in yards allowed per coverage snap, receptions allowed per coverage snap, and targets per coverage snap. So basically, nobody's really throwing his way, and when they do, they're not really getting much out of it. That's not to say that he's this shutdown coverage guy. It's more just like he's often taking running backs into the flat, and they're not really doing much. So he's good, but he's not being asked to do a lot in coverage. As a pass rusher, he's developed a ton. He's kind of like remember what Danielle Hunter was like when he was like a sophomore, when he wasn't just purely relying on speed and burst, but he wasn't like a fully fledged all pro or anything. That's kind of what Barr's like as a pass rusher. He's really good with his hands. He'll anticipate offensive tackles or tight ends punching, and he'll swat them away. He'll swim. He's got an arm over move, so he's getting really good with his hands. Which is, if he leaves the Vikings, I can definitely see him being on another team in kind of that outside linebacker stand-up role, which is where I think he's good. And then he's just, as a run defender, he's good. He doesn't make splash plays because he's surrounded by guys like Linval Joseph who make the splash plays for him, but he fills his gap and redirects backs towards the rest of the team. So it's funny, like Barr was probably a little underrated in like 2014, 2015, and then he had a terrible 2016 year, and then he still made the Pro Bowl that year, so he's kind of overrated then, and now he's back to being underrated, in my opinion. So funny career, but talented player.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the whole situation is fascinating because, I actually might work on an article about this because he came out of college as like the next great pass rusher, and then Zimmer sticks him as a traditional 4-3 linebacker role, and it's like,
Yeah,
maybe they're doing that so he doesn't get the high sack totals, so they don't have to pay him as much later on. I don't know, but he is. I was one of the people who was one of the fans who's very upset with him. After that Rams game, I was actually at the Bills game too, where Josh Allen hurdled him, and I thought he looked terrible. For a couple
yeah, that
games
was
there, but. I have changed my mind lately after doing quite a bit of research, listening to you and some other folks as well. I think he is pretty underrated in his role, but will he be back next year? I think that's a whole nother discussion. We could probably make a whole episode of the show just talking about that.
yeah, and that's a really interesting question because it's like, how much do linebackers matter? Like they're not your cover corners, which are so key. They're not your pass rushers, but at the same time, Zimmer's scheme is different when Barr isn't on the field. So how do you weigh that importance? And is that worth $10 million? Is that worth $12 million? Should you just let Eric Wilson take over because maybe Barr's a better player, but Eric Wilson is probably not like $10 million less in value. So I don't know. That's an interesting question. So
Yeah,
it'll be
we'll
interesting.
definitely have to. We'll definitely have to revisit this later because I got a lot to talk
Yeah.
about with Bach. It's a pretty interesting subject. So just one more point, basically. Well, two more quick points. One quick one: the Jair Alexander comments. I know we talked about that earlier. Do you think this is some beef between the two teams boiling up here for the next season, or do you think it's just kind of a young, immature player's, I guess, point of view?
I mean, corners kind of have to have that cockiness. Like you see it in every single shutdown corner. Like Rhodes has it, Marshawn Lattimore has it. Jalen Ramsey is like the poster child for this. So it's like it's understandable, but it's such a funny thing to say after like your team got like just destroyed in the passing. I mean, look at those Thielen catches. It's like, how can you say the Vikings weren't that tough?
Yeah,
It's like, what? You just got mossed, man. Uh,
I thought
but
your
I
tweet
don't
was
want to
pretty right on the point.
I don't want to detract too much from Jair Alexander because that kid's a baller. He's really good, and a lot of what like made Thielen and Diggs was had a fantastic game as well. What made them so impressive is that like Jair Alexander like was played a pretty really flawless game, and it was Thielen was still managing to posterize him. So talented player, but maybe save your trash talk for not when you just got beaten badly.
Yeah, that's a great point. Wow. So that brings me to my last point about talk about getting beat uh, in Minnesota. Was this Mike McCarthy's last game as the head coach of the Packers in Minnesota?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you would think not because the Packers are such a stable organization, but they did let Capers go last year and they brought in Pettin, and Pettin's been fantastic, by the way. Um, just in terms of the other big schemers in the NFL, like Pettin is up there along with the Zimmers of the world. Like in terms of the creativity, the variety he throws at you, the unpredictability, the fast paced wildness. So the Packers defense is going to be someone to watch out for in the years to come. Um, I already said I like McCarthy. I think he's he's not a great coach, but he's a good coach, and he's been getting so much of the blame when I don't. I think he's got a good system, and his quarterback just isn't running the system. But at the same time, it's 2 straight years of missing the playoffs when you have a future Hall of Fame quarterback and in the offense. You got talent like Devontae Adams, David Bakhtiari, Aaron Jones is he's going to be a problem as well in the run game. So um, it's hard to justify that. So um, personally, if I were the Packers, I wouldn't, but I can understand the appeal of wanting to find the next Sean McVay. So I don't know. I,
Yeah,
I guess I guess if I had to pick right now, I would guess yes, they're going to let him go at the end of the year.
yeah, I agree with you. It's a tough call. I mean, he's been around for a while. I would say more good times than bad, certainly.
He's
And
won a
he
Super
had,
Bowl.
yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Fisher
That's
got like 10 years from one Super Bowl, so surely McCarthy
yeah,
can withstand 2 years of missing the playoffs.
yeah. No, absolutely agree. He did have some questionable play calls, but I mean, running right up the middle to Linval Joseph. It seems like teams just continue to try to do that for whatever reason. But that does bring me what could be an end of an era with McCarthy. It kind of shifts me to the Patriots game. Uh, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, the New England Patriots, still one of the best teams in the NFL. Uh, I guess Brady's getting up there in years as well. Uh, how do the Vikings stop Tom Brady, arguably the best quarterback of all time?
That's a tough one, and I'm really looking forward to it because I think, for my money, Belichick and Zimmer are two of the very best schemers in the NFL. Just brilliant with what they do, especially pre-snap. Brady's so good at this, sending a tight end out wide, sending a running back out wide, getting that man zone look, being like, okay, the safety is up high. It looks like a single high look, but we'll see how they rotate. Okay, he's rotating post snap. Okay, so I'm going to hit this route, or we're going to option to this route, and it's um, when you can read the defense as well as Brady does, there's just very little the defense can do. But at the same time, Zimmer is so good at disguising it, and he'll rotate safeties, but not until like the play clock is down to 5 seconds left, or he'll drop everybody back into cover four when it looks like it's going to be cover one. He'll give you man looks and then drop into zone. He'll do half man, half zone looks. He's really the most. I mean, there's especially with like how dominant the Pete Carroll cover three system has come in the NFL. The other complete end of the spectrum is Zimmer being like, I'm going to run cover one and cover two and cover three and cover four and cover six, and I'm going to run everything and some things that I don't even have a name for, and man zone matching, and I'm going to run stunts and run blitzes, and I'm going to put Harrison Smith as my nose tackle. So it's going to be a really interesting chess match, I hope. So I think with the Patriots, what's tricky about them is it's not just Brady too. Like this year, they got Gronk, who's been dealing with some injuries, but it sounds like he's full go for this week. So uh, Gronk is his own. He's the greatest tight end of all time, on top of the greatest quarterback of all time. Phenomenal receiver, phenomenal blocker, smart, can get open, athletic. He's a matchup nightmare. So I think it's interesting to say, what do you do with Gronk? I think some people want to put like a George Iloka or a Jaron Curse on him. Curse has done really well in kind of that slot corner role. And he's 6'4". I do worry a little bit about whether he can athletically keep up with Gronk's deep speed or his change of speed, his agility. Um, I would probably lean a little bit more. I don't think we necessarily want to man up on Gronk. I think that's the kind of guy you kind of want to shade zone coverage towards. Um, and then I think Rhodes and Josh Gordon, that's a matchup to watch. And they're, I would bet money that Rhodes is going to be on Gordon, shadowing him for the majority of his snaps, just because they match up so well. And Josh Gordon, he it's a funny career from Gordon, because he had that year with the Browns where he looked like a future Hall of Famer, and then he had his marijuana troubles, and now he gets traded to the Pats, and he hasn't looked like necessarily the future gold jacket wearer, but he's still every bit as talented. Just a very um, not a burner, but a just a smart, um, tough, physical possession receiver. And so that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. And then they've got your Edelmans and your Hogans and your guys who will beat you with their routes. So it's going to be tough, and it wouldn't be surprise me if there are guys that are just going to be left wide open, and we're going to be like, how the heck did they get that wide open? It's just when you're as smart as Brady and Belichick are, you're going to find stuff like that. So I don't know. They've got a great offensive line too. They're kind of an old school power running offense, not in the sense of like bruisers, but in the sense of bruisers too, but in the sense of like pulling guards and double teams and man blocking, gap scheme stuff. So, and they've got some good backs too. We'll see our old friend Cordell Patterson. So that's another reunion match. So a lot of interesting stuff in that. I'm really looking forward to seeing Belichick at full power versus Zimmer at full power.
I couldn't agree more. The chess match, like you said. I was watching some tape on the Patriots, and like you said, some of the plays they come up with, it would be a quick play action. Brady fakes it, turns around, throws it immediately. The guy is wide open, with no defender within 10 yards of him. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see if Zimmer is able to cover for that. So, and on the other side of the ball, what's the Vikings game plan against the Patriots defense, who are pretty good at rushing the passer? They don't have a lot of sacks, but definitely one of the top teams in terms of pressure.
Yeah, they're excuse me, they're generating pressure at a good clip, and that secondary is sneaky good. I think Stephon Gilmore is Pro Football Focus's like most valuable defensive player this year, or maybe it's Aaron Donald, but I think just based on how much they value cover corners over pass rushers, he's one of the top corners in the NFL this year, and he's been a lockdown shadow corner like in the Rhodes mold. So. He's been fantastic. They got the McCourty twins. Devin McCourty was one of the great safeties for a long time. Back before like Harrison Smith had his like all pro season, it was like McCourty, Eric Berry, Earl Thomas, Harrison Smith. Like those were like the elite cream of the crop guys, and he's still very good. Patrick Chung's great. Deron Harmon is they use him as a rotational guy, but he's kind of like a rangy free safety type ball hawk. He's very talented. So they've got a lot of good guys in the back seven. Maybe the one weakness is their linebackers, while very good run defenders, they're a little big and slow. Again, Belichick's kind of got an old school type defense in that way, whereas everybody's been going smaller and faster. Belichick's staying, let's stay big and run over people in our power run game, and then stop people with our big fat linebackers. So maybe the most obvious way to well, there's two things. The one thing Belichick loves to do is he loves to take away your number one receiving threat. With the Vikings, it's pick your poison. So if Gilmore is tracking Diggs or if he's tracking Thielen, my guess would be Diggs, but I guess we'll see. And then maybe they can double team or shade their safety towards the other guy. I think that'll set up Dalvin Cook. I think Cook is going to be if we win this game in a dominant fashion, Cook is going to be the reason why. And I just had an article conveniently that dropped on Dalvin Cook and why I think he's just so
Yeah, go
incredibly
check that
sexually
out.
talented. Yeah. So the way to beat the Patriots is you try to stretch them horizontally. You run those outside zone runs that Cook is phenomenal at, and that our offensive line. They might not be the best run blockers in the league, but they can move in space. So stretching them out horizontally, that's one way to do it. And then getting the ball to Cook as a receiver as well. That's another way to do it. And then maybe you just try and see what they do with Diggs and Thielen. And if they're both double covered, maybe trying to hit Rudy, maybe this is Treadwell's breakout game. Aldrick Robinson can get another catch for another touchdown. So that would be my idea.
Yeah, and we saw Rudy Rudolph get more involved last week, which I know there's reports of him being a little frustrated about not getting the ball as much. And do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, they say the tight end is quarterback's best friend type of thing, and it was a little surprising to see Rudolph not get so many targets. Do you think that'll change going forward?
Yeah, and and it's a little surprising because Cousins has always loved throwing to tight ends, but at the same time, in Washington, his best receivers, well, Deshaun Jackson, I don't know, he was stacked. There were a lot of receivers he had in Washington, but Reed and Vernon Davis were both fantastic when they were healthy too. So um, Rudolph is a good tight end, but um, he's not going to be the number one target when you got guys as good as Diggs and Thielen on the field. So, but he's good. He's very good at finding the soft spots in zone coverage. And that's a weird talent because you have to have a lot of spatial awareness and recognition of what the defense is doing, and he's fantastic at that. He's not necessarily Zach Ertz as a tight end route runner, but he's good at getting open, especially when and tight ends often are tasked with finding little creases in the defense. He's not a big yak threat, but he's a huge athletically. He profiles actually pretty similar to Gronkowski in terms of their combine profile. Just like a huge dude with a lot of athleticism and boot. So obviously not in the same tier as Gronk as a player, but good player and the type of player where if Belichick is focusing all his attention on the two wide receivers, he's the kind of guy who could have a big game.
And speaking of those wide receivers, I was going to get to the injury report. We have Diggs and Rhodes, most importantly, that missed practice again today. That's both Wednesday and Thursday that they've been out. And notoriously, if they don't practice all week, they generally do not play. So, what kind of impact will Diggs not playing have on this Vikings offense? I mean, we saw it one time earlier this year against the Lions, and Thielen actually only had like 3 catches or something like that.
I think it was
Diggs
23
out.
yards.
Yeah. So I guess what are your thoughts on if Diggs were to miss the game? What is the Vikings offense going to do?
Yeah, I'm hoping they're just trying to be cautious with Diggs because it sounds like he's got a knee wrap or something. And I'm not sure if he got injured in the Packers game because he obviously played it out because he had basically the dagger at the very end. Um, so I'm hoping he plays, but if he doesn't play, that's an issue because Thielen is an All-Pro wide receiver, so not to take away from him, but part of what makes him leading the NFL in catches and targets, second in yards, and number PFF's number one wide receiver is that Diggs is drawing a lot of the defensive attention. He's getting the Patrick Petersons, which means Thielen, when he's in the slot, it's like you got an All-Pro wide receiver against your number 3 corner or your linebacker, and it's just like, man, Thielen's going to feast on that. So um, if you don't have Diggs, then the Patriots can just put their number 1 All-Pro cornerback on Thielen all game, and good luck having Aldrick Robinson get open against the other guy or Treadwell get open against the other guy. So that would be tricky, but hopefully Cook is full go because I think Cook is in the same caliber of talent, if not production, as those guys. So that would be the key if Diggs were out.
Okay. And I know Diggs has told, he told Chris Thomason of the St. Paul Pioneer Press that he does plan on playing. So let's hope that's the case. But and
Pray
hopefully
to,
we'll
pray
see.
to Valhalla. Pray to Odin.
Right, and hopefully we see a lot of Cook either way. Honestly, I think I'd like to see that. And I mean, your article pointed out so well. I mean, he's so explosive and so hard to bring down. And even the Patriots are a great defense. I think. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are; you're going to have trouble tackling him.
Yeah. Yeah, Cook
And
is Cook is special.
yeah, so go check out Nick's article if you haven't read it yet. It's got some great video examples as well. And I was going to
Yeah,
get
dip
to
back into the 2017 tape for that one because there's a lot of, especially his runs there, just showcase his footwork and his balance are just otherworldly. Like the guys will just glide off him like he's greased in butter or something. It's like how does he do that? And then when he's done gliding through blockers, guys will like attach themselves to him and he'll just keep churning forward for another 2, 3, 4 yards. So he's it doesn't show up in his box score stats, but he's the kind of guy where like if you're predicting like a breakout player, he's the type of guy who says hasn't gotten his opportunity yet, but just wait, and he's going to have another one of those 70 yarders like we saw in the Lions game. So he's a special guy, he's a special talent.
Yeah, let's hope that that happens this Sunday. And one other player listed on the injury report, David Morgan. I think this will be his third straight missed game, if I'm not mistaken, if he doesn't play. Uh, I know he's the team obviously misses him up front. They were able to get the win last week, and uh, Rudolph and Conklin helped out a little bit. CJ Ham a little bit too, lining up a tight end. Uh, what are your thoughts on Morgan and what he brings to the Vikings offense? Is he that huge of a loss when he's out?
I think he is. Sorry, been dealing
No,
with
sorry.
a little bit of a cough, but
Jersey man.
last year he was I think Pro Football Focus's number 3 tight end. Um, which sounds like, but like David Morgan, our random blocking tight end, was better than Zach Ertz and Travis Kelsey. Actually, yeah, according to the PFF tight end grades. So not that he's as valuable, but it's really his blocking. He was far and away the best tight end blocking tight end, at least by his grade last year. Just a tremendous blocker for his size, and he's underrated as a receiver. He's another guy that's very tough to bring down. Will break yardage in the open field, break tackles, fight for some yards after the catch, falls forward, and just absolutely sure hands. Huge catch radius too. Not necessarily because of how big he is, but just because he's got the body control to be able to secure catches with like full extension all the way out. So um, talented player, and we miss him, especially now that we have Brian O'Neill in. Um, I know Brian O'Neill has not given up a sack this year, and that's outstanding. Part of that is he's one of about 5 starting tackles to do that, so quite an accomplishment. But at the same time, he's had some easier competition, and he's struggled nonetheless, especially with power rushing moves. So we've been giving him some help. And David Morgan, especially. I hope we have him in the last game of the year against the Bears, because you don't want to go up against Khalil Mack without somebody like David Morgan to provide some support. So talented player, and he's probably an underrated loss to the team in terms of what we've been missing. But just
Oh,
have
and
to use Ham and Conklin and everybody else without him.
I was gonna say, I think you just missed one thing in your analysis. I mean, he's got great hair too. Don't forget about the hair.
Yeah,
Uh,
between him and EK for best hair game, Kendricks.
yeah,
One of them has
yeah,
got to
that's
be
true.
the commercial. And high school Harrison Smith. Have you seen that picture of him, or maybe it's Notre Dame Harrison Smith?
No,
He's
I
got
haven't.
like the super long hair. Oh man, we should put that in the
Harry
show
did.
notes or something. It's like Harrison Smith before he shaved his head and got his like Jason Statham look going. He was like super long hair down to his shoulders.
Have
If you
not
just
seen
Google
that. I got to
Harrison
see
Smith
that.
long hair, it'll probably pop up. It's hilarious. It's like
I'll have to
now
look
the
that up
most
here
feared man in
shortly.
the NFL.
Oh, I can't wait to see it now. So that kind of gets me into the. I know we've been talking about the Vikings offense for a while now, but I wanted to hit on just one more point with John DeFilippo, who's been taking some heat lately. He seems a little more uneasy in his press conferences. And I don't know if that's because of the success of the offense or success of the team. I know there's some pretty dang high expectations for him when he came to the team. What are your thoughts on what he's done lately, and I guess what to look for going forward? I know you mentioned Cook, but what do you think? What do you expect this week out of the JDF and his play calling against the Patriots?
When we hired JDF, I thought this is like a dream scenario. This is a guy who was getting head coaching interviews just won the Super Bowl, turned Nick Foles, who was before then into like a career backup journeyman that nobody wanted on their roster, into the Super Bowl MVP, and he earned it because he outplayed Tom Brady. And we saw what he did to our defense, the supposed best defense in the NFL, put up 38 points on it. So I guess 31 because of the pick six. But he tremendous track record, huge expectations coming in, because not only do we bring in DeFilippo, but we also bring in Kirk Cousins, who's this $84 million upgrade over Case Keenum, who's also a career journeyman. And um, so far, the results have been hard to say they're not disappointing. The offense, by pretty much all the efficiency metrics, is bad. The success rate running is abysmal. The passing game is good, but it's not as nearly as good as it was last year. Case Keenum led the NFL in quarterback and QBR and in DVOA, which is like how many points is he adding per play, and what's his responsibility for that. I mean, well, you exclude Carson Wentz because he got hurt by the end of the year, but that was Case Keenum. So we went from that to Kirk Cousins, and Cousins has been 12th or something. Like good, definitely good, but with the expectations you have based on last season's offense, it's been a downgrade. And it's a big mystery why, because it's not like Cousins is playing poorly. He's played above expectations, certainly above my expectations. I was not as high as him coming in, and he's proved me wrong on his arm, on his ability to play under pressure. He's been surprisingly good in a lot of ways. Thielen, he was an All-Pro last year. He might be even better this year. Diggs is making guys look stupid every week, making guys trip over themselves. Cook is back and he's healthy and he's breaking tackles at a higher rate than last year and at the highest rate of anybody in the NFL. Um, the offensive line has not been as good, but it's not like the line was world beaters last year. So it's tough to figure out, like, schematically what's going on here. And I think one of the big things is Shermer was really good at setting up route combinations downfield a little bit, and he would stretch defenses vertically. He understood that the offensive line needed some help, but he would do these max protect plays, or these give a chipping tight end and then have Diggs and Thielen run and do these intermediate concepts downfield, these scissor routes, these dagger concepts. And DeFilippo has been shying away from those. It's been more of a short and shot type offense where we'll target Diggs or Cook on these screens or these short dig routes, and then we'll take the occasional 40-yard bomb as a shot. So I miss that. I feel like we're always struggling to just get like to a 3rd and 2 if we're lucky. Whereas last year with Shermer, it was like first downs were coming like candy. So that's part of the problem. I'm a little miffed at how he's been using some of the players. I think Diggs is moved away from the Cordell Patterson, Percy Harvin gadget type player of Diggs, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because Diggs, I think, is 3rd in the NFL in broken tackles among wide receivers. So he's really good after the catch, but he's even better if you get him downfield and get him at the break at the top of his route. So I wasn't in love with that move. And then Cook, I think, can be an Alvin Kamara level of receiving weapon, like one of the best receivers, not just running backs, but one of the best receivers in the NFL, because he's just so good in the open field and he can run the full route tree. And I think when you look at like what Sean Payton is doing with Kamara, or what McVay is doing with Gurley, or better yet, what Reed is doing with Kareem Hunt, you just wish, DeFilippo, why aren't you watching this film and doing what they're doing? Do those wheel routes down the sideline. Do those combination routes with wide receivers. They're deadly, and Cook can be so good at it. So all that said, I think he's been pretty good. I don't think he's been bad. I don't think if for some reason he doesn't get hired next season to be a head coach, I'd be happy with him sticking around. But compared to Pat Shermer, there's no doubt that it's been a downgrade. So
I think that's phenomenal stuff, what you just said. And on that note, that's pretty much the end of my notes. I just wanted to say I know the Patriots. Pretty sure I saw a stat that said the Patriots haven't lost at home since like 2015.
They're really
So
good, in case you were
yeah,
aware.
that's just ridiculous. So was there anything else that you'd like to add, Nick?
Mm, it's a big game coming up, and we've been looking for our statement win. We've come so close. We lost to the Bears by 5. We lost to the Saints by a touchdown. We were driving at the very end, and then it ended with a strip sack. I think we outplayed the Saints, but we just had two catastrophic turnovers that were basically like a 17-point swing. This is our opportunity for a huge statement game to beat the Patriots, and a fallible Patriots, I think, as well. I think you can attack the Patriots downfield with double moves. I think you can attack. I think Tom Brady, as good as he is, his accuracy hasn't been the same this year. So I think they're an imperfect team, and I think if we beat them in their home stadium, it's going to be the big statement win. A lot of people have been saying, "Oh, the Vikings haven't beaten a team with a winning record," which, yeah, that's how winning records typically work. But this could be the opportunity to really come out and say, "Hey, we are contenders as well." So, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Would this? Can you? I'm trying to think of a bigger regular season win for Mike Zimmer. If he were to win Sunday, can you think of a bigger win, at least lately?
I mean, shutting out the Packers in Lambeau last year was pretty fun. Um, Let me think. That I think that clinched the division. We've had some big wins along the way, but I think beating Tom Brady in their home stadium at Gillette would just be would top it, because that's doesn't get tougher. The competition doesn't get tougher than Belichick and Brady in their home turf. So
Yeah, I agree. Well, on that note, we'll call it a night. Nick, great stuff. It was a lot of fun getting to know you a little bit and getting to pick your brain. So I appreciate it. And tune in next week. I'm sure we'll be covering the Vikings Patriots and hopefully the Vikings win. But we'll be
yeah,
covering the game nonetheless. And everybody have a great night. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Nick.
take care, guys. Skol.